Hello, this is Aiden Alcalde. I will be reading An American River by Mary Bruno. For those who are in the Albert Dorman Honors College, I am a student there too, so enjoy. This is the preface. For the first 18 years of my life, I lived along the final 17-mile stretch of the Passaic River. That's the dirty, ugly part of the river that passes through the most crowded, industrialized part of the country. The Passaic forms the western border of my hometown, North Arlington, New Jersey, a tiny borough just a few miles north of the river's mouth in Newark. Our house sat on a steep slope along above the river. In the wintertime, when the oak and maple trees were bare, we could see the water from our front porch. Sometimes, in summer, when a flood tide would overwhelm the river's sluggish current, the Passaic would smell, faintly, of the sea. I didn't have much to do with the Passaic as a kid. I crossed over it often enough, every time we visited my mother's large family, who all lived on the other side. But I never fished the Passaic or took a boat out on it. I certainly didn't swim in it. I didn't really know the river. I just knew that it gave me the creeps. Despite my estrangement from the Passaic, and without any conscious intent, I have sought out rivers in my life, to study them, travel them, live near them. I'm drawn to the patterns and power and persistence of water on the move. In fact, I keep a river list. Only those rivers that I've been in or on qualify for my list, which is surprisingly long. It starts with the historic Delaware, which separates New Jersey from Pennsylvania. Many summers ago, during a family picnic at my cousin Betsy's in Frenchtown, New Jersey, we went tubing down the slow, wide run of river that flows past Betsy's house. There is the Cedar River, a gentle blackwater creek that winds through the New Jersey pine barrens. My brother Joe and I canoed a narrow sandy stretch of the Cedar one hot afternoon with George, a tenderfoot colleague of mine from Newsweek. There is Ohio's Maumee River, where on a frigid winter morning I waded in to collect diatom samples. The surface waves that slapped my rubber boots turned instantly to ice, which crackled as I sloshed around in the shallows. There's the lazy Skagit in Washington State, site of my first paddle with Kate, and the rushing Nisqually, also in Washington, where Kate and I once had a kayaking misadventure. I insisted we could paddle downstream to the river's delta, then back upstream along with the incoming tide. At least I got the first part right. There is the wide, muddy Missouri, the setting for a 4-day long canoe trip along the stretch that drains Montana's parched Missouri breaks. I have traveled up and down. I have traveled up and back down Brazil's Rio Negro River, a major tributary of the Amazon, along the oh so civilized Seine in Paris, on Africa's wild Zambezi above Victoria Falls, and through the lush inland delta that the Okavango River creates where it empties into the Kalahari Desert. All four are on my list. I included Washington's Columbia River, whose dramatic canyon I once water skied through at sunset when the cliffs and sky and water were all shades of indigo, and Idaho's Snake River, where I camped with fellow birders on a hawk spotting trip, and the Rio Grande, where I cooled off once after a hike on the Texas side, and the Potomac, because on a because on a cool September morning many years ago I followed Ralph, an old roommate, across a chest-deep stretch to a small island in the river's center, where we found the cabin we'd been hired to clean by its reclusive heiress owner. Finally, there is the Hudson River. I spent many years living along the Hudson, first in Tarrytown, New York, where I went to college, and then on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where I occupied a series of illegal sublets during my early years as a journalist. I have also plied the Hudson on Circle Line cruises around Manhattan, but mostly the Hudson made my list because of one unforgettable image from September 1985. With Hurricane Gloria bearing down on the East Coast, I walked from my apartment at the corner of Broadway and West 77th Street down to Riverside Park. I wanted to watch the river take the storm. I made my way through the park to the wrought iron railing which runs along the promenade above the Hudson. A parade of tankers had taken refuge in the river. The giant cargo ships were lined up in the channel, single file, bow to stern, upstream and down for as far as I could see. Pause, I'm drinking water. Alright. We're on page 5 still. The Passaic River isn't on my list, but I began thinking about it several years after it tried to commandeer an essay I was writing about the American Southwest. Once the Passaic crashed my essay, it was extremely reluctant to leave, and I found myself struggling to whittle its presence down to a few sentences. I was supposed to be capturing the harsh beauty of parched desert plains, and instead I was going on about floating trash and rusting bulkheads. I felt ambushed, like the river had been waiting all this time for a chance to hijack my attention. And it worked. When I finished the essay, I began researching the Passaic. I learned that the river, like the state it flows through, has a serious image problem. The Passaic is as historic as New York's storied Hudson, and in some places, the 77-foot-high Cascade in Paterson, for one, just as majestic. Now, I'm on page 6 now. But most people, including some New Jersey natives, have never heard of it. Those who have known it only as one of America's most polluted waterways. It's hard to bond with a river like that. The Passaic is a poster child for rivers, for nature, everywhere. It was once the lifeblood of its region, source of food and power, playground of the rich, avenue of transportation, communication, and commerce. The first white settlers sailed up the Passaic in 1662 and founded Newark, the nation's third oldest city, on its banks. The river's abundant charisma fueled an explosion of growth and industry that helped transform the fledgling United States into a global manufacturing powerhouse. But in time, the Industrial Revolution it helped to spawn would poison and betray the Passaic. By 1952, the year I was born, the river's beauty and majesty were dim and distant memories. Its lower stretch was a toxic canal. The Passaic wasn't a source of wonder and delight, or even interest anymore. For a generation, my generation, it inspired fear, revulsion, and denial instead. How did this happen? How could a river that was once celebrated for its beauty become a Superfund site? How could my hometown river repel someone like me, a lifelong lover of rivers? And how did I wind up a river lover anyway, after growing up along the sorry ass Passaic? Could the river be rescued? Was anybody trying? Did anybody care? Or was the Passaic just one more piece of leftover nature to be tossed out with the trash? What did nature mean to us anyway? And who would we be without it? Would the disappearance of the natural world of its wild places and creatures bruise our soul the way the loss of a loved one breaks our hearts? The questions piled up, the answers not so much. It was the summer of 2005. I started making calls. The first person I reached was Andy Wilner, who at the time was the executive director of the NYNJ Baykeeper Association. Baykeeper is a nonprofit dedicated to protecting local water bodies. Andy was a passionate, generous, cocky, fearless, and a bit bombastic on the phone. I loved him. He called the NY/NJ metropolitan area a big region with low environmental self-esteem. He said his mission was to awaken citizens to regional treasures like the Passaic. He said that people didn't know the Passaic anymore, that the river had become a stranger to them, and that you couldn't care about something you didn't know. He invited me to join him on a Passaic boat ride. I decided there on the phone that I might not be able to make people care about the river, but I could certainly reintroduce them, and myself to the Passaic. Surely there was more to my hometown than the oily garbage strewn slough I remember. I'm drinking water again. I'm on page 7. I've lived on the West Coast for almost 30 years now, far away from my New Jersey roots. I strayed, in part, to escape environmental blights like the Passaic and the sadness they inspire. The Garden State can be hard on nature lovers. For all my time as a Jersey expat, though, I'm still a fiercely proud homie at heart. I spent years defending my state from people who deride it as a giant toxic waste dump that every local calls Joycey. It didn't seem like much of a leap to start defending my river, too. The Passaic needed a champion. It had a story to tell. The story of an urban river at the start of the 21st century. I wanted to be the one to tell it. As I began dredging up the river's past, the Passaic surprised me again. The river's story echoed like my own. Idyllic beginnings, sad turns, lingering scars, uncertain future. The story got personal. To New Jersey, a way of saying I'm sorry for not sticking around to try to make things better. But maybe it was more than that. Maybe going back with the Passaic was a way to move forward with my own life. Maybe the river could help me make peace with the ambient sadness that seems more and more to haunt my present. And so, the book became a duet. Part natural history, part personal history, part adventure, part meditation on the wonders of rivers, the enduring ties of family, and the power of water and lost. The Passaic River was calling me home. Thank you. That was the preface. Have a nice day.